Hello, everyone. Welcome to today's webinar, Securing a Remote Workforce. We're so glad that you are all listening in. Thank you so much for taking time out of your day to join us here. I know our presenters are all super excited to dive right on in, so I'll keep this relatively quick before handing it off to our moderator, Rashmi, to lead today's discussion. So my name is Emma, and I'm a marketing lead here at a staffing and IT recruiting firm called Motion Recruitment. So I also run a few of our local chapters of Tech in Motion, which is our international tech event series. For those joining us for the very first time, Tech in Motion traditionally is an in-person tech event, but obviously right now we have transitioned to a virtual webinar series. And basically the goal of our event series is for technology enthusiasts to learn together, to come together and have questions answered in real time, discover new technology, and hear stories that inspire each other. Given today's climate, we're so excited to bring to you these virtual events and discussions and reach an even broader audience. Even today, for the first time, Tech in Motion is going international, which is really awesome. So a few quick housekeeping notes before we go ahead and kick off. So you'll all notice that you've joined this webinar in listen-only mode. So feel free to submit questions and comments in the chat box on your GoToWebinar panel, and then we'll do our best to get around and address those questions during the Q&A session at the end. Today's webinar will also be available and after the live session ends, so you'll receive a link via email to view the video. And that's also great to share around to anyone who may not have been able to make it today. So I think that's all from me. So without further ado, I'm going to go ahead and pass this over to Rashmi to get things started. So she is the Director of Certification and Training at Rogers Cybersecurity Catalyst. In her endeavor to increase diversity in cybersecurity, she recently joined Rogers Cybersecurity Catalyst as Director of Training and Certification. The Catalyst is a not-for-profit owned by Ryerson University. The Catalyst launched September 2018 and empowers Canadians and Canadian businesses to take the opportunities and tackle the challenges of cybersecurity by driving collaboration and excellence in training and certification. Commercial incubation and acceleration, applied R&D in public education, and policy development in cybersecurity. She is also a social entrepreneur, founding 2 businesses in the technology services industry. So Rashmi, I'll let you take it from here.
Thank you so much, and thank you to Tech in Motion for putting on these great events. I think they're fabulous and very timely, and the topics are very relevant to everyone. And welcome to everyone who is participating with us this afternoon. Before we get started, I want to share a couple of just a number with you, and just let that number sink in for a moment. From recent studies, it has been said that over 75 million employees may be working from home before the crisis is over. Experts predict this will be a tipping point for work from home. So today's conversation on securing our remote workforce is absolutely very timely and really needed. So, as we start to look at the events of what's happening, it's really unfortunate right now that the circumstances currently that we're in, but what it's doing is it's forced, employers to do something in a week that Fortune 500 companies typically would take months or even years to roll out across the globe, across their organization, and that is to move all their employees to work from home. Think about that. Like, how did we do that? Whereas before, we would not be really thinking about moving our workforce to a work from home model. But what this crisis has done, it's set an unprecedented opportunity as well. And it's on a massive scale. We're now having to assess our IT and cybersecurity preparedness. Specifically, how do we, on a mass scale, secure our work from home workforce? And at the same time, secure our businesses is really what we're doing. And today, this afternoon, we're going to be addressing exactly this around 3 key themes as we dive into the topics of securing our remote workforce. So we're going to be looking at the 3 themes of 1, assessing and addressing security vulnerabilities, 2, managing increased phishing and malware, and 3, innovation and trust. Number 3 is something that I'm really eager and curious to hear from our panelists on because it is unprecedented rapid innovation that we're also having to look at and challenging our own playbooks. So we're very fortunate to have our 4 panelists joining us today to share their views, experience, and playbooks on how they are securing their remote workforce and clients and what they're looking at as we start to go international with these ideas. I'd like to, I'm going to just introduce everyone quickly and then have them introduce themselves. Craig Jones. Craig, you want to wave hi? Director of Global Security Ops at Sophos. Chris Kirsch.
Hi there.
Marketing at Veracode. Mike Lemire, CISO at QuickBase. And Bobby Singh, CISO and CTO at TMX, Toronto Stock Exchange. I'm not sure if Bobby's been able to log back in, but he'll join us very soon. So Craig, why don't we start with you? If you can just give us a introduction about yourself.
Yeah, sure. Hi everyone. My name is Craig Jones. I'm based in Oxford in the UK, and I work for Sophos, and we're a large antivirus security software vendor, and my team's a global team that basically looks to secure Sophos internally, and we also help secure all of our customers too. And I run a team that's based from India through the UK and both sides of Canada.
Great, thank you. Chris.
Right, hi, my name is Chris Kirsch. I work in technical marketing for Veracode. We are a vendor in the application security space. And I've done cybersecurity technical marketing for over 20 years and also have a big passion for security in my private time. So particular interests are OSINT and social engineering. So I won the black badge at DEF CON a couple of years ago for the social engineering challenge, the CTF there, and I'm also an advisor on the National Child Protection Task Force, which helps law enforcement with OSINT. Yeah. Thank you.
Great. Michael.
Hi. Yeah, I've been with QuickBase for just over 4 years. QuickBase is what's called low-code, no-code platform as a service. We are selling to about 6,000 companies, and we're seeing a lot of demand in a recent past. Before that, I've been in security for about 16 years. I've been in IT for about 25 years. I've led security programs at about 3 or 4 different SaaS companies, from startups to larger companies as well.
Great, thank you. And Bobby, has Bobby joined us? No.
Yeah,
right.
Can you guys hear me?
Yes, now we can. Thank you, Bobby. If you could take a moment to just introduce yourself, that would be great.
Yeah, no worries. Bobby Singh, as Rashmi mentioned, I'm a CTO and CISO for the Toronto Stock Exchange. So I wear 2 hats, so I talk to myself a lot. That's just been a bit of comes with the territory lately. Took over the CTO role about 3 years ago, so that's been a good journey. Really trying to understand how I can push the cybersecurity agendas into the technology and vice versa. So that's been a really good understanding of how technologists think about cyber, and having those both portfolios have really helped to really not just to push security, but also to understand how to make the availability higher, as well as we continue to go down the cybersecurity model. So happy to be here.
Great, thank you. Well, welcome to our great panelists, and I am going to ask that to our participants. As we're chatting, if you have questions, please do send them in, and I will begin moderating and picking from your questions as well. So let's get started. First theme, assessing vulnerabilities. I'm going to throw this question out over to Craig to get things going. Craig, how do we review and rate our infrastructure to see if it's optimized for remote work? Do you have anything in place right now that scans and patches everyone's being remote beyond a VPN? So what do you think? Like, what do we need? What's missing right now?
Well, there's a number of things missing. I guess number one, right? I mean, you would imagine it would take something, more than a pandemic for us to massively test our infrastructure, right? That, maybe for once in a while that we would have everyone working remotely, that we would look at the scope of our infrastructure, perhaps. I mean, going to your second part of that question, where we're looking at checking your infrastructure and looking to see if you've actually fully patched things, that's a really tough thing to deal with, and it comes in several parts. One being the fact that you need to scan your external infrastructure to know what you've got on the internet, and as well, it's making sure that you've got sufficient clients on your end user computing devices that allow you to tell if they're actually patched and they're up to date. And again, it's connecting those two systems together. So if you have end user devices that are unpatched, we should really have it set that they can't connect to your remote infrastructure, for example. It's being smart in the way that we work, I guess.
Michael, anything to add to this?
Yeah, I like to take a historical kind of perspective. And, I think that the last 10, 15 years, what we've seen in trends in the technology industry have put us in a very good position relatively to deal with this virus and to deal with a almost fully remote workforce. So first of all, even 10, 15 years ago, most people had workstations, not laptops. So today, I know at QuickBase, every single employee has a company provided laptop. So that right there is a huge advantage. So all of our staff took their corporate managed laptop and there's now working, doing their work on their corporate managed laptop. So that means that we are able to ensure that those machines are continuously managed and patched. Whereas, if they were using their personal computer for work, we absolutely have no view into that. So that's the number one big change that has helped us. Second, obviously the cloud is a big help here, because it wasn't that long ago that many of our business processes, and still the case in many companies, your business process may be running on hardware that's running in your own data center. So when you have that situation, was very common in most companies, less and less so as we go forward. But that requires VPN, secure network access. So by virtue of the fact that most of our productivity apps, and in QuickBase's case, all of our applications are cloud-based at this point. So we immediately are able to deploy all the productivity tools to our remote users the same as they were in the office. There's no difference at all.
So how many individuals have you been able to securely have them transition quickly to work from home, Michael?
Yeah, I mean, in QuickBase's case, every single employee is working home remotely currently. We're in the US and we have an office in Europe as well. Yeah, so there's no department, there's no function in our companies that's not able to work remotely. And we're lucky because we're a technology company. Other companies have, business processes that are dependent on people, and office, it may be your mail. In our case, that's not the case. So we're fully productive remotely, and we're very lucky in that sense.
And Bobby, I was going to say, Bob, what about you? How did you manage to ship this for the Toronto Stock Exchange for TMX? I can only imagine what that must look like for the traders as well.
I think that's a really good point. Let me just go back to address Michael's point, or add to Michael's point for a second. I think he alluded to personal laptops or devices. I think what we have not discussed, and I think that's going to be a bit of a pain to manage, as well as the routers and the Wi-Fi the folks are now using from home to connect to the corporate LAN, or even to go to the cloud-based applications. So as much as we can control the laptop either through corporate laptops or manage some level of security on the laptops, one of the things we have done is actually give people best practices on Wi-Fi, managing their Wi-Fi and routers from the cable companies or the internet providers, to make sure those are properly patched, or at least the default password is changed, and so forth and so on. Sorry, going back to your question on how the Toronto Stock Exchange was able to move everyone remotely, was we're a very heavy tech company. I would say close to half our staff is in technology. For us, we've been testing our BCP on a regular basis. As you can imagine, we're heavily regulated, and I think that helps us a lot. I think certainly as an organization that goes to their BCP plan and was planning to stay, or is going to have to stay for a long period of time, there were always minor hiccups, but beyond that, I think we were very seamless in that regard to move and support the marketplace remotely.
And I think, as many of us have our business continuity plans in place, I think for many of our organizations, we weren't quite as ready as we thought we were to implement them. So really great to hear about the organizations that you gentlemen represent, that you were able to do that. So let's take a look. We talked about cloud, actually. That came up. So as you move things, Mike, to the cloud, was that an internal decision? Well, before this, obviously, but was it based on your business continuity? The cloud has always been a little questionable, especially when it comes to security sometimes.
Yeah, well, we're a cloud-based company, and my entire career, most of it has been with cloud-delivered products, even before they were called cloud, back when they were called application service provider. So our goal from the get-go was to be a cloud-first company, because we recognize the benefits of being in the cloud, both for our own stuff, obviously, but for everything that we're using. So we've actually have had active projects over the last few years where we identify anything that's in our office that's a dependency on our business, any business critical functions in our office, and we've been actively migrating them out of our offices, and we are now complete. Everything's out of the office. A couple of services that we've migrated to, for example, Amazon and other cloud services. So at this point, yeah, we have no on-prem IT services whatsoever at this point.
That's really interesting. Chris, Veracode, how is Veracode managing through?
We're actually managing really well, and I want to answer the questions a little bit about Veracode, but also a little bit about what I'm seeing in our customers. So a lot of companies seem to be shifting the things they have behind the VPN out to the cloud, right? Because when they created their VPN infrastructure to access the on-premise tools and applications, they were really thinking about that as a, when somebody's traveling, when somebody's working for the weekend. They weren't planning to have everybody remote and everybody accessing the VPN at the same time, right? So it wasn't built for those kind of for that peak load. And so that's putting a lot of stress on the infrastructure right now. And what companies are doing is two things. One is they're asking their employees to use a split tunnel VPN. So it's a setting where only what needs to go to the company goes through the VPN. And if you're going to YouTube, going to LinkedIn, going to whatever other traffic you have, goes out to that service directly without going through the company network. So that takes some of the load off. But also, just in terms of working properly and being remote friendly, shifting your applications to the cloud makes a lot of sense. And we're seeing that for internal applications, but we're also seeing it for applications that are exposed to the internet, for example, for customer-facing interactions, right? Customers, partners, those kind of things. We're seeing, we were looking at our customers and how they're changing priorities in the current climate, and many of them are accelerating processes for digital transformation. I'm having an echo here. If everybody could hear it, that would be great. So a move towards digital transformation, where they are trying to, number one, shift a lot more processes to the digital world, especially if they can't send customer reps out to the customer, for example. But also in that same motion, often shifting stuff to the cloud. And as you're doing that, you also need to figure out how do you secure those properties and infrastructures, right? From the underlying vulnerability management for the infrastructure, but also the applications that sit on top. So looking at that application security, I think, is also important.
That definitely is the application security piece. I'm just going to add one follow-up question to that before we move on to the next theme that we have here. But who, out of from what you see, maybe Craig, in terms of what you're seeing, application security and the accessing things from my kid's laptop, or the kids are on my laptop, and now how do I maintain that, right? Like, now that lines have blurred from what is corporate property to what is my property. I'm home for a while and my kids pick up my laptop and they could be on anything and bringing something onto my laptop that is now creating vulnerability to those applications. How are you managing all of this? What are some of the ideas that you have? Perhaps that's, some individuals might be also considering.
Yeah, sure. I mean, it's a good question. I don't think it's an easy answer either, to be honest, but there are several different mitigations you can use. So in Sophos, we've done a huge shift. I mean, most of us were working remote before this whole shebang, or this whole thing kicked off. But basically, there's several things you can do. We've actually moved to what's called zero trust networking, which is a new form of actually having several layers of authentication and understanding which devices are connecting to your applications. But in a weird way, you're actually putting your applications on the internet, which is just a crazy concept, and having effectively small tunnels or small VPNs directly to those applications, rather than the traditional, I've got a huge VPN, we're going to throw everything through that VPN. And it's a strange custom to come to, and this is actually something that's based off an old Google paper. Google released a paper back in 2010, and it was called Google Beyond Core. And it was based off of a total new architecture that Google were pushing in place, based off of an incident that Google had. It's really interesting if you want to go back and read it. It's called the Google Aurora incident. And they moved everything to that type of model, just like we have, and it's so much easier. So it means that everything that we had was more or less in place anyhow. Being a 30-year-old company, though, and incredibly a 30-year-old security company, which is like almost an incredible thing, we still had some things that were still on premise, but it was very easy to actually hook those up to that type of infrastructure and just present it out to our users. As for connecting into other devices, from other devices, like you're saying, maybe your kid's laptop or something, you can accommodate that type of things very easily with this type of infrastructure. It's very flexible. So yeah, I mean, it's just having that all those pieces in place really, that makes it nice and easy,
Yeah, I agree with what, I just want to add, I agree with what Craig was saying, what Sophos has in terms of what they're using for, zero trust network. We're also looking at those types of solutions. I view that as like late phase 3. Companies need to make sure they're doing like phase 1 and phase 2 correctly before they get to phase 3, which is, zero trust networking. But, the basics, the foundations are so important. Identity management, role-based access. And since we're using so many cloud services, federation, single sign-on is just really more important than ever. It's ensuring that you have an account that is your system of record, whether it's Active Directory or another system, and that identity is propagated to all of the systems within your organization that your users need to access. So having a strong identity management platform to enable you to federate, to do single sign-on, and doing role-based access using groups, so your users are provisioned with the tools and the applications that they need. Like that foundation is so important. And then beyond that, what Greg was referring to, zero trust networking, pardon me, the basics also entail really strong authentication. And I miss saying that, but obviously, so once you've gotten all of your assets under identity management, single sign-on, and role-based access, you also need to strengthen how you authenticate your users. And Rashmi, that's kind of what you were getting at. So when your child's on your work laptop, they're not going to have perhaps your phone for the second factor, or there's additional. We're going to strengthen the authentication mechanism. So for single sign-on, that means multi-factor, starting with make sure you get the code on your phone. Beyond that, using an authenticator to make sure only Rashmi holding her phone with the passcode entered can enter that code. So that's a good way to protect assets, to ensure that only corporate users have access to them. And then what Craig was referring to with zero trust networking, that's an awesome next step, and we're looking to do that. And then basically, beyond the strengths of role-based access, identity management, and authentication, it's another layer, like Craig was saying, of protection, which is based on the network. So ensuring that you're coming from a trusted network, or ensuring that your network traffic can't be sniffed because it's going through a IPsec or a SSL VPN.
Great, thank you. No, you're right, because the two-factor authentication piece, and but now some companies who did not have the authentication in place when they moved everyone to home, it's going to be quite the challenge now, I'm sure, to figure out how to get that in everyone's hands and educate them on what that means and why it's there. So I'm sure there's going to be a lot of organizations now who are eagerly trying to figure out how to do that, because we still have a couple of months more in front of us. So
sorry, just to add to, sorry, go ahead, Rashmi.
Go ahead, Bobby, please.
No, I was just going to add to Michael's and Craig's point. I think, look, we don't really know, given we just started working from home about 4 or 5 weeks ago, the impact of Rashmi, as you just mentioned, the kids, kids using work laptop or your laptop for games or whatever else. And we talked about split tunneling earlier. I think the type of incidents we may face probably go up a bit. As much as I appreciate the fact that we could use multi-factor authentication and have a bunch of other controls in place, there's still a malware that can go get on the laptop and can monitor traffic or keystrokes and whatnot. So I think we're going to probably see bit though, because of the home usage being substantially very high, that we'll probably see some type of attack. What I keep preaching to my team is, let's have a really good incident management program in place. We also know in the cyber world, we know very well that things are going to go bad, and we just need to be prepared for it to ensure that we can support incident management remotely. That's going to be a very key component of, given even the security staff is remote, are the playbooks that we currently have and the scenarios we tested in prior to going remotely fully, do they include supporting an incident by having a staff remote as well, not just the staff, but also the security staff that's remote. So really it's testing that piece as well to say, how are your security tools and triage tools that you have in place? Are they going to be able to are you going to be able to manage that remotely and manage the incident?
Really great point. I didn't think of that at all. Your incident management team is remote, and the triage team as well.
Yeah.
Really good point.
And when you're thinking about that, when I talk to my peers that do a lot more social engineering than I do, often over the phone, right? It's very common that they're trying to target remote employees because they're not as dialed in. It's much easier to impersonate somebody from the company over the phone. You can spoof the caller ID, all of that stuff. So think about what processes do you have in place for one employee to authenticate another. When it's a direct call, if they don't know each other that well, so they can't recognize the voice, or like if it's a video call, recognize the face, right? Like how do you best do that? And that's really tough to do. One way to think about it is what I call like OSINT proofing your authentication processes, right? What is information that I can get from the internet through a whole number of sources that may be able to pass the sniff test for an authentication, and ruling those out and making sure that those are not being used for any critical authentication processes over the phone.
Which you take us right into the great segue into the next theme, which is really around managing the increased phishing attempts, the malware that's coming out, the social engineering. And you just spoke about that around if someone can spoof my authentication, and now they have access to my files. What are we doing? What are you seeing now as some of these safeguards that companies are having to put in place that may not have been there in the last 4 weeks, but now definitely need to come in? Or what are some of the attempts that you are seeing? I'll ask Chris to continue on his conversation.
I think there are a few things that are always true, but if we're just thinking about what's changed, I would look at what you're sharing when you're doing video conferencing, for example, right? Are you sharing anything on your screen that gives away too much, especially with outside parties, where you're sharing with them, you know, anything that might enable them to attack you, your operating system, all of the applications that you're using. You know, do you have the icon bar visible at the bottom? Because the better you can profile somebody in the digital arena, the better you can phish them, right? If you know exactly what PDF reader and version they have, what, you know, email client, what, you know, like a whole bunch of other things. You might know what vulnerabilities they have. You might know like what gets caught, what doesn't get caught in phishing emails and so on. The other thing is, you know, what are you sharing in your background and around you from your home? That might be a privacy concern, right? So that's also something just to think about a little bit. What could somebody do with that? Because a lot of people are posting kind of like their full, you know, here is my battle station at home kind of picture with the 3 screens. And, you know, what are you giving up with that when you're posting that on social media with the hashtag working from home?
Really good point. Anybody, Michael, anything to add to this?
Yeah, it's just about, so let me say what the kind of highlights of 3 main things we've done to really clamp down on phishing at QuickBase. We had about 1.5 years, 2 years ago, we had so much phishing showing up in our users' emails. We had to adopt an email filtering platform. We're an Office 365 shop, so we're using, you know, Outlook in Office 365, and the built-in capabilities of filtering for malicious content and quarantining is just not good enough. So we had to find a better solution. We've been using a platform called Mimecast for about 1.5 years, and it's been a tremendous success in terms of reducing the just sheer volume of phishing that we see in our users' inbox. Secondly, we had a very severe case of targeted spear phishing, which is, you know, emails that purport to be from executives at our company to other users asking them to do things, typically coming from a, you know, a fake personal account. So we've got specific filters that we're screening for those now. So that's been a great help. So, you know, number one, you got to reduce the amount of phishing coming into your users' inbox. Secondly, assume some will get through. So your users running, you know, and obviously one of the most important things we do is training. So obviously continuous reinforcing about phishing. Phishing is the #1 risk in the security world, #1 vector for, you know, security breaches because soft malware is installed that way. Hard on getting a feedback.
It sounds okay, Michael.
Okay. So the endpoint needs to be protected, and hats off, Craig. We have recently ourselves moved to Sophos, and that provides 2 really important, you know, controls or protections. So one is, you know, don't allow malware to be executed, right? So to scan in real time a unknown file that the user is attempting to execute, right? So that's one. The second is phishing very often contains, you know, a link. Simply, hey, go here to this link. The link taking you to a site that looks like a different site that is trying to steal your credentials or install malware. So network layer protection to prevent your users from actually being able to access that malicious link. We used to use a product from Cisco called Umbrella. It provided DNS level protection. So every request needs to go to DNS. Every request there is screened. So if it's a malicious site, then the users don't get redirected via DNS to that site. So we have that now built in Sophos. And then I mentioned training. So training is obviously the third most important thing. With those three main things, I can say at QuickBase we haven't had any incidents of phishing being successful.
Great.
And with Michael, knock on wood, that continues to be the case.
Right, I shouldn't say that. You're right.
Yeah, I would actually advise that, especially in the current climate with people working from home and being under a lot of stress, that you warn them about the kind of triggers that phishers might use. So for example, if an email comes in with the words layoff or a salary reduction or a first COVID death in the company, those are probably emails that would get a click very, very fast. And because people are anxious right now, and I would warn them specifically about those kind of phishing schemes, because I could imagine that they're extremely successful right now.
So a comment just came in, and it was around, investing in remote worker training and protecting the endpoint. So how we really, it really comes into that continuous training that Michael just spoke about to prevent what Chris is telling us could happen. So Craig, what do you see, like the employee training? Because we've kind of paused on a lot of that effort, but it seems to be something now that has to be heightened, or an investment that needs to be put in even more than ever.
Yeah, sure. I mean, employee training, I mean, it should be a continuous piece. We do a ton of work for this in Sophos. I mean, just like Michael, I mean, we get huge amounts of phishing sent to us. I think it's probably quite prestigious for an attacker to be able to phish a security company. Makes us a particularly big target, really. But what we do, we give very good orientation when you join Sophos. We cover a lot of our existing threats. We cover some of our phishing emails that we've had in the past, and we highlight this really well. We also cover things like WhatsApp phishing. So we've had like employees been attempted phishing over things like WhatsApp and FaceTime and various other platforms. But one thing we do is we give continuous phishing training. So we'll send phishing emails out to employees, and we're looking at how employees react to those. Not so much whether they click on them. We want to know if they actually submit them to our team quickly. So that's our main metric behind this. We want people to be able to submit those phishing emails as they come into our team before other people actually click on them. Because the sooner we can find them and block them, the sooner we're protected, basically. So it's that mean time to response that we're looking for. And we actually give we actually send broadcasts out, usually like weekly, sometimes fortnightly, around interesting phishing emails we've seen. We give prizes for people submitting phishing emails to us. It's usually pretty fun, and that helps really build a security culture and make sure that people are totally aware of what's going on, and it usually incites a few good internal discussions around these things, especially if they're particularly interesting phishing emails. I mean, working a security company, everyone is interested in security. It's a bit like working in a restaurant with a bunch of Michelin star chefs. Everyone loves food in that case. It's similar here with us in security. So everyone's super interested in it. So yeah, those are a few things I'd suggest you do just to try and heighten your culture, really.
I would like to mention also, in the world of automation, there's a lot of efforts around, a lot of products are coming out that attempt to automate your processes in security. And this phishing is always, to my mind, what I've seen, the #1 use case for automation. And the reason is because we're all dealing with this is, one user reports they got an email, so you want to put that into your block list. So that's an example of something we at QuickBase want to try to automate, or a reported email showing a malicious link wasn't caught by Sophos. We want to add it to manually. So those taking actions on phishing and automation around that is going to be a focus of ours. And I think it's a common thing that's going on, because I see it pop up as a very common use case for automation platforms.
Craig is looking at you, probably thinking, no, we caught it.
Oh, well, we can't get everything, I'm afraid, but yeah, we'll take that one. We're always interested to have them. I mean, to be fair, to go on from Mike's comments, I mean, we've got our own phishing automation stuff that we built internally, and one of the pieces that we do is we actually move people's emails in Office 365. So, for example, if someone's reported a phishing email, we'll move that for all users into a specific folder. So immediately we try and contain that threat as much as possible. It's a small piece that people tend to overlook, and it's quite new for many like automation platforms, but it's a cool little feature, I think.
It really is. That brings us into a next point, though. Like, as you're starting to capture more information, more data, and starting to really look at what's happening at your the remote workforce, it's an opportunity for innovation. And it's an odd time to be innovative, but sometimes it's necessary for innovation. It opens up issues around also privacy. What is my information now that I'm now putting on my work laptop that I'm making susceptible to the world? You know, my kids might be using the only laptop in my home is the work laptop, right, for schooling. And now I'm using it to do my online banking. I've now put all my forms on there, my bills are on there, my payment is on there. So we're dealing with privacy, and also what each one of you has spoken about is building trust. So let's talk about innovation for a moment, though. Around innovation, what are some things that you have done as an organization? We'll go through everyone. Or what have you seen other companies doing at this moment in terms of innovation related to cybersecurity and related to an area that they might have had to accelerate, because it's accelerated innovation as well that we're having to think and rethink how we do things. We'll start with Bobby. Bobby?
Yeah, hi there. I think I'll go a little bit broader on the question. I think when you talk about innovation, some of the stuff we've done, especially over the last few weeks, more to do with digitization. You know, the programs or folks in the past that were reluctant to go digitize their world for whatever reason, they've gone that route. They're forced to go that route. So I think we're seeing a lot more folks, you know, and processes that were somewhat manual, or printing even for that matter, that was done, you know, occasionally, and reams and reams of paper that were printed out at times. You know, you're not going to do that at home. It just doesn't work that way. It's not efficient. It's, you know, you don't have an unlimited supply of paper all the time. So I think we're seeing people that have either reluctantly or for whatever reason now have adopted or had to adopt to going digitized. We are seeing people that are, you know, were reluctant to do anything, and now that they want to be on the forefront of, hey, how can I make this electronic? How can I get, you know, software like DocuSign, for example, or other things that I can float around where I can do workflow signatures rather than trying to manually pass around a piece of paper with manual signatures. So, and how do I access certain applications that are giving me more, you know, more electronically than going through some manual processes? So we actually seen a lot more digitization of our workflows. With people have adopted much more strongly to some of our tools that we use for our automation, for example. So you know, that's been really the accelerator in my mind, or COVID-19 has been the accelerator in my mind to get us there. And I'm hearing a lot more organizations that were really manual based have gone that route of just kind of getting people to digitize stuff, and the programs that were not going to get any wind because of the reluctance from people have actually gotten some wind on when it comes to innovation in that specific area.
Great, thank you. Digitizing, and I never thought of it from that perspective. That was actually really very interesting. Chris, your take on this?
Sure. So anecdotally, what I'm hearing from our customers is that they're accelerating their digital transformation, right? But also when we are looking at the aggregate, I've got some really interesting stats. So we're a SaaS company that scans people's applications for vulnerabilities, right, as part of the software development process. So each time a developer checks in code or a company wants to release their software, we scan it. And so we count the number of scans and kind of have a chart and track that month over month. And typically we see that going up like healthily month over month. And so as the world got disrupted, we expected to see a dip in the scan volume. We did see a small kind of dip in the week where everybody was moving their desktop to the home and like those kind of things. But month over month, it was still up. So the world's, like, at least in software development, like we pretty much didn't see a blip, which is really, really interesting, right? Developers are already used to working fully digitally. They organize their work in Jira, they communicate via Slack. They're probably happy that they're at home where nobody can disturb them, except their kids maybe. So I think in the software development world, in the tech world, I think it works great, and I think it's going to foster innovation even further on how can we build things that help us all move faster, right?
Yes, faster mobilization and deployment, always the big pieces. Thank you.
And remember, right? Just one thing to add. There are a lot of companies that, let's say you have a fashion brand, right? Like some, I don't want to name any brands on this podcast, or on this webcast, but let's say you have brick and mortar stores on online. Your brick and mortar stores are not generating any income right now. All of your income is coming from online. So you really got to drive that, both drive it in terms of innovation and drive it in terms of security, right? And make sure that those online apps and processes are secure. Sorry, didn't mean to interrupt.
And that comes to trust, and that comes right back to trust again.
Yep.
To build. Craig, what are you seeing or your thoughts on this particular area?
Yeah, sure. So I was watching BBC News yesterday, and the CEO of Tesco, Tesco is a big UK supermarket chain. I'm not sure if you get it in the US, but he actually mentioned on BBC News that they've innovated more in 2 months than they have in 10 years. And I think you'll probably find a lot of companies along the same lines. And it was actually great seeing the CEO of Tesco actually admit that on live TV in the UK. But in reality, I think that's what it is. I think we're going to see many companies who are going to find that a majority of their workforce are going to want to work remote, or now they know they have the ability to work remote and they're successful at it. There's no reason why they shouldn't, And I think we're actually going to see out the back of this much better, more balanced working. And with companies set up to do that, we're going to remove all the challenges from there. And as well, when you think about like a business, so for example, ours, we have 65 brick and mortar offices across the globe. And some of these offices are for maybe 2, 3, 4 people, and now we know that we can do everything remote. Well, what's the point in having that? And then when you start to look at it, you realize like how much cost reduction you can have around, removing physical buildings. And I just wonder like what the impact of this is across the industry, out with kind of cyber, but just when we talk about innovation, I think we're going to see massive step change in cultural innovation in the workforce. It's phenomenal.
Yeah, I think it might really like push down commercial real estate at the same time, right? Yeah.
Yeah, the impact is huge. Michael, what are you seeing?
Yeah, same. I mean, culturally. Sorry, did you hear that? Okay. Did you hear that? Okay. All right. So, like what Craig was saying, culturally, at QuickBase, I think we're seeing that we're able to be remote. We're able to be successful. So I think culturally, our organization, as well as many others, we're going to come up to the realization that, hey, we can be productive remotely. So culturally, I think even at our own company, it was sort of, it wasn't really a favorite of management for people to work not being in the office. But so I think culturally, that's going to change in a big way. I think, otherwise, we'll continue to see shifts in the direction which enables a secure workforce. Companies that haven't done enough to get there will have to press harder to get there quicker. They're going to have to, in order to, ensure their staff can continue being productive and they continue being in business. Lastly, I just want to say, I'm very excited to see, what can companies do in terms of technology to help, even us at QuickBase. I think the first part of it was like, look at ourselves. Are we okay? Yeah, we're okay. And then the second piece was like, what can we do to help? What can we help in this situation? And I'm very proud to say, we have released a bunch of stuff to help with COVID. Small business loan application on our site, which is free for anyone to use. In addition to giving credits to customers, or being flexible with our payments, or we're trying to help our customers get through this after realizing that we're going to be mostly okay.
I think that is a great sentiment to say we are okay, and now it's time to look outwards, and great approach. And to Craig's point, there is research being done right now. There is research on what is the impact of working from home mean right now on the long-term effects of working from home. And I'll definitely dig up that study and share it with the team at Tech in Motion to be able to share out with everyone once that study is completed. Just one last question. We're so close to our last 10 minutes, but it's a question that just came in, and it's actually an important question around privacy and data. As we start to look at just your thoughts around the whole COVID-19 tracking and human tracing, and now we see Apple and Google collaborating as their duopoly, I guess, is that the best word, in being able to, their response in helping. So is that a privacy issue? Is there cybersecurity concerns that we should have? Where is this data residing? What's happening? Just quick, we'll go around the table, a minute thought on each. I know this needs its own topic one day, but maybe we can start with who wants to kick it off, the conversation? Michael? All right.
I'll take that. So, I think it's obvious that in order to, manage this crisis over the next year or two until a vaccine is out, that comprehensive testing and tracing is required. And we've seen this in other countries, particularly countries like that don't have great privacy protections, like China or Russia. So how we approach this in the USA as well as Europe is going to be really important. Obviously, it's needed in terms of dealing with the crisis. However, we have privacy regulations, we have HIPAA, that none of that's changing. So your personal information needs to stay personal and only shared with those who need to know it in any sort of technology solution that's proposed and propagated. I see it as necessary, but it must be controlled, in summary.
Great.
Yeah.
Chris, thoughts?
Sure. So I see it in the same way that I look at some of the things that are happening on the political scene, right? There are some extreme drastic measures that government needs to take right now to keep everybody safe. And we just got to make sure that once the crisis is over, we go back to quote unquote normal, and that these drastic measures don't become the new normal. Specifically to the Apple and Google collaboration, I haven't read their paper or attended their conference call, but there is a really good discussion for people that are interested in the Risky Business podcast, this week's edition, where they were debating the pros and cons of that proposal, and actually came to the conclusion that they really thought it through from a privacy and security perspective. And so for anybody who's looking for like a color commentary on that, the Risky Business podcast has a really good episode on that.
Great. Craig, a minute, a thought?
Yeah, I mean, I agree with the guys. I think we're lucky that we live in nations where we do have some privacy laws. In the UK, especially, we have GDPR covering us. I mean, the only disappointing thing about this is the fact that it takes two tech companies really to put this together, and it isn't something that's actually instituted from a government. If you think about how much resources our governments have, that they don't have the capability to do that, it's almost disappointing. I also listened to the Risky Biz podcast. I thought it was great. Amazingly, I also seen on Twitter that someone suggested that blockchain might actually be an answer to this, and I nearly fell off my chair. So, so you never know. Maybe it is the answer to it. But it'd be great to finally have a use for something for it, I guess. But yeah, that's my main thoughts on it.
Bobby, want to weigh in?
No, I think I don't have anything additional to add. Honestly, I agree with the other panelists. I think, yes, these are unprecedented times. We have to do unprecedented things, but once this is all over, we should go back to normal. And I also believe that even during these times, the privacy should be maintained in whatever shape or form. So no, nothing specific to add.
Thank you. That brings us to time. We could continue on. You know, the information that each one of you has brought forward, I could have turned it into an hour with each one of you personally, and the value that you bring into this space. It is an unprecedented time, and it's definitely going to challenge us in the future. So the things that we start to learn from this particular moment and from each one of your learnings and what you've brought forward is going to have remarkable impact over not just the next several months, but over years as we start to challenge what it means to work from home, feeling secured in our new workspace, as well as ensuring that our employer is also safe and that our data is safe. With that, I want to say thank you to everyone, to Chris, Craig, Michael, and Bobby for your time today and for your openness. It was just fabulous. Your candor was truly appreciated. I'm going to hand it back to the Tech in Motion team and let them close it off. Britta?
Awesome. Awesome. Thank you so much, Rashmi. And I want to just thank all of our awesome panelists for offering your time and expertise today. This was such a great discussion on the state of cybersecurity, our remote workforce today. And then again, thank you everyone so much for joining in today's webinar. I hope you all enjoyed the discussion and are leaving here with some really valuable insight and knowledge. Last but not least, please join us for our upcoming two-part webinar series for tech leaders. Part 1 will be on Tuesday, April 28th at 4 p.m. Eastern, and will be on how to navigate today's climate as a tech hiring leader. And then Part 2 will be followed up on April 30th at 1 p.m. Eastern on mobilizing a remote workforce as a tech hiring leader. So if you have any questions about the current state of the tech job market and how that might impact you, please don't hesitate to reach out to Motion Recruitment. We're here to help in any way we possibly can. We'll share the resources and recording with you right after this call. And thank you so much for joining. Stay safe out there, and we look forward to continuing to connect with you during this time. Thank you so much, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank
Thanks,
you.
bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Great day. Be safe, everyone.